I had mentioned in my last video that, specifically the last Diary of Cinephile, that there's this little bit of I don't want to say it's an unspoken area, but I don't feel like a lot of people who have channels like what I have talk about this a lot. And I guess it has to do with a lot of the reasoning of maybe why we bring up certain facts or certain pieces of a film's history or production. Just there's something that I don't feel that is really said out loud enough, and I just wanted to come on for a second and kind of speak about that. First off, new angle. Let me know what you think. Now, when it comes to wanting to talk about movies and exist on YouTube in that area or any area in that matter, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, there's certain pieces that a lot of us discuss, and there is a lot of people who feel like it shouldn't be part of the discussion. But I just have my reasonings to why I utilize them in part of my discussion. You'll notice that I talk about a lot of different things in some of my longer form scripted videos, or even in these videos that I do for the podcast side of things, my sort of passion project of talking about movies in a certain extent. Now, mind you, I do think that I have a channel that's slightly different just because I don't like to just speak negatively about a movie just for the sake of speaking negative about it. I feel that movies are meant to be enjoyed. They are meant for entertainment. And I've been loving movies since I first walked into a movie theater when I was a kid. The first three movies that are vivid memories of mine from my younger years was Batman from 1989, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Dick Tracy. And I remember the theater I sat in with. It was a theater in Brooklyn that no longer exists. It was between 18th and 19th Avenue on what was the main street? 86th Street, and it got turned into a Marshalls before I turned like 10 years old. So I didn't even really get to enjoy it into my teen years. But then there was another theater that was close by called the Marvel Movie Theater, and I've seen so many movies in there, and I've just loved movies. And that's why when I got the opportunity to kind of make this channel what it is when it comes to my journey in content creation, movies kind of hit a little bit, and that's where a lot of you guys are here for. And I don't really like to say too many negative things unless there is 100% something negative to say. Otherwise, I just love movies. I always find something that I enjoy about a movie, and I don't look at it too cynical, and I don't look at it too critical, even though I do try to still give somewhat of an unbiased review or an unbiased discussion about it. Now, when I think about the idea of being unbiased, I think about how there are many different areas in what makes a movie good or worthwhile. And if any film can kind of hit one of those four areas, then I think it can kind of lend itself to being something that's special in a way. And maybe even just not special is the word. Maybe more so just like a film that you could easily make it something that is yours in some capacity. And again, not all films are for everybody. I, for one, I know I sit around and I advocate for certain films, and then I bash on certain films that a lot of people love. Huge majority of people love Thor, Love and Thunder, and they love Thor Ragnarok. I think those are two of the worst Thor movies because I think it really diminishes the character of Thor and it turns him into more of a joke when Thor is actually not meant to be that much of the comic relief in a way. They sort of turned Thor a little too comical and took away from his true meaning of who he is, and they just weren't the greatest representations of that character. But then I'm also the guy that'll sit around and say that the Ben Affleck Daredevil isn't as bad as people say it is, but that's also going off of the idea that there is a director's cut that is vastly better than the main theoretical release that everybody saw and relates it to. The director's cut is way better for that film, and it gives you a way better perspective on what they were actually trying to do. But of course, that didn't come out till like a couple of years after the fact, and nobody really gave it the credit it was due, and the damage was already done, and Ben Affleck hates that character. And, by all means, I'm okay with people hating it. I'm not going to say you're wrong for hating it, but that's just the point. Certain movies are not for everyone, which is why when people look at a movie like Thor Ragnarok, they love it. They think they think the idea of the buddy cop makes so much sense. That whole aspect of him and Hulk and their chemistry on screen, it makes sense to them, and it just doesn't to me. And that's what makes movies so beautiful. It makes it where you can actually have this melting pot of different opinions and different ways of how people view characters, storylines, or just films in general. Now, when it comes to films, I hold them to a certain scrutiny where there are things that I use as part of my discussion pieces for what a movie should sort of have under its belt in some capacity. And that's these four categories. Now, the four categories I usually hold a movie up to, it's longevity, meaning like, can it withstand the test of time? Does it reach cult status in some capacity? And to me, that means a movie is successful, whether or not it was successful either critically or financially. And then, of course, there's the two elephants in the room, and that's the second one, which is the critical response, and the third, which is the box office response. It's the numbers. It's what this film did as far as keep itself afloat when it comes to the company. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but one of the biggest Christmas movies of all time is A Wonderful Life. That movie actually tanked the production studio that made it. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people don't really look into that. And even though it's a vastly successful film that everybody loves and praises, and it's everybody's Christmas movie, yeah, it destroyed pretty much the production company that was behind it, and they don't exist anymore. Look at A Bronx Tale. The company that created A Bronx Tale, that only lasted like 5 years. You know, these are all things you can look up. I don't 100% have the stories of what exactly happened or if they had anything to do with it, but a lot of companies, they just don't withstand anything, and that's because that there are these fiscal numbers that movies have to reach, or movies have to do something in order to keep these companies afloat. Why do you think Disney is still around? It's because they're making millions and millions of dollars, so the numbers matter in the discussion of a film. So when you see somebody talking about how this movie cost 40 million to make and then it grossed 140 million, that's an important piece of the puzzle, because that determines whether or not that it was successful as far as financial. And then the financial success doesn't always connect to the critical success. And a lot of people don't even like the critical response to things, because most of the time people don't trust critical people. They don't trust those critics that are out there, your Siskel and Ebert. They don't trust a lot of the ones that have sort of the magic wand of being given the title of the New York Post movie reviewer, or the film reviewer for the New York Times. They don't 100% trust them, but they're not always cynical. They're not always looking at these things like everything is the Godfather. And then sometimes it feels like they're weighing everything up to think that it's the Godfather. Like, you can't sit there and take like an Adam Sandler movie and hold it up to A Bronx Tale. You just can't. They're two completely separate films, but critics don't always do that. Critics like to sit there and think that they're sort of above enjoying a movie for anything less than just giving it some sort of real cutthroat review by saying, oh, it wasn't funny, it didn't make me laugh. And then sometimes it's just like, well, fuck that, because just because it doesn't make you laugh doesn't mean it's a bad movie. So you giving it a bad review doesn't necessarily mean that I should take that into consideration if I think it may or may not be funny. Like, one of the big movies that I learned about recently was Labyrinth. Labyrinth has hit cult status pretty much overnight. Like, it felt like everybody loves the Labyrinth that I've ever spoken to. There's very few people that I know that have never even seen it, let alone if they've seen it, if they have anything really negative to say about it. But if you go back to when that film came out, not only was it financially unsuccessful, but critics really didn't like it. And if that was really the determining factor for a movie, then Labyrinth would have never been able to withstand the test of time, which is why the Labyrinth falls into the idea of longevity. It hit cult status, it is vastly known, and is still vastly popular, and it gets more and more popular every year. The merchandising behind Labyrinth is crazy, and you would have never have thought about that the year it came out, because it failed. Essentially, when you don't hit certain financial markers and then you don't hit certain ratings, that movie could easily fail. But that's failure on the perspective of whether or not there's worth on the production side of things from the production company and studios behind it. But for us, the fans, that's where longevity comes in. And that's when also the fourth area comes in, and that's just the attraction, the allure that draws you into a movie, the thing that kind of makes a movie live above its stature. You could say that's kind of cult status as well, but there are certain things that I don't think really fall into that, just because I feel like a film hitting cult status is like a positive thing, whereas this idea of being attracted to a film can also have a negative connotation to it as well. Take the film The Room, the Tommy Wiseau film that everybody knows, and if you have never heard about it, I'm sorry, I'm the first one to bring it up to you, but The Room is a notoriously bad film. I don't even think it falls in line with the idea of cult status, and I could be wrong, but in my personal opinion, the attraction to that film is just how bad it is. You watch that film to understand where everybody else is coming from as far as that film is concerned, and then you never watch that film again unless you're trying to show it to somebody else, and then you just are thrown into sitting through it again, and it's just that bad. So that's where the attraction level comes in. Why do you think there's 3 Human Centipedes? Human Centipede isn't this cult film because it's a good film. It's reached this attraction level where people go to it because they just hear the story of what the Human Centipede is, and they have to see it. It's like you have to watch a car crash. You have to watch a 3-legged dog. But that's why when you're talking about movies, you have to take these things into consideration. What are you watching it for exactly? And when movies are able to sit in any of these 4 categories for me, whether they're financially successful, critically successful, they have some sort of attraction level, or they have some sort of longevity to them, to me, those films, they need to hit those markers to be sort of on a level where I put them in my, I guess you could say, lexicon. And that's the other thing, is that sometimes the attraction levels are just based on what you can connect those films to in a way, you know? So when it comes to being this movie person, this reviewer, this content creator that likes talking about movies, the reason that these 4 categories are important is because they tell the story of the film, and you have to involve them when you're talking about the film, because if you don't, you do a disservice to what the film stands for. When I was doing the Code 3 video, and I discovered that they never disclosed any of the financial numbers for that film, that gives me a weird feeling, because I feel like when you don't want to disclose that, there's a Schrodinger's cat like effect to it, where it's both a positive and a negative. You either made back the money and it was worth it, or you didn't make back the money and it's not worth it, and both of those exist at the exact same time until otherwise proven, which is the true factual nature of it. And there's a lot of people out there that say it just doesn't matter, and if you think it doesn't matter, that's perfectly fine. But when it comes to a person wanting to discuss videos, it has to matter to us. It has to be something that puts perspective on a film's success, because if a film can't hit any of these 4 levels, it feels like it's not successful in any capacity. And again, you could have horrible movies that fit into one of these, and that to me means they have something about them that keeps them sort of alive in a way. I probably won't get a lot of views on this video, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And I just really wanted to have this quick discussion about like the reasoning behind where I feel that there's this area that movie people talk about and why we talk about it and the reasoning behind it, just from my perspective. Everybody else could have their own twist on how they kind of do their movie reviews or their movie videos. But for me, it really boils down to just, is the film something that was successful on some level? Is the film something that attracts me to it, where I feel like bringing it up is sort of important in a way, or at least something that's worthwhile for a discussion of some kind? And does it have some kind of longevity? Does it have the ability to withstand time in some way, shape, or form, regardless of whether or not it was a critical or a fiscal successful film? You know, whether or not it made millions and millions of dollars, can you watch it in the next 10 years and it still be a great film? That to me adds an importance level to it, because you can see films that do not fare well money-wise that withstand time. And again, It's a Wonderful Life is a perfect example of that, and there are tons of examples out there. But what I'm really trying to get at is, being a movie reviewer needs to have some clarity to it. And I don't think enough channels talk about the clarity of what they try to really discuss. And when I do my videos, I try to be straightforward with how I feel about the film, what I think the film did, and just try to present, you know, the facts of what I believe is necessary when discussing that film. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are channels out here that are a little more transparent about that. But if they aren't, and they have no problem being just this space where all we do is bash on films because everything sucks and all the movies haven't been good in the last 30 years, all right, kudos to you. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to enjoy the movies for what we're getting, because movies are fantastic. You know, movies are great, and I'll always have a passion for filmography and film history, and just a love for movies that I feel just transcends the concept of, do we really need to bash every movie just because it's missing something that is so vastly important that it diminishes the enjoyment of it all? I tend to think not.